Thanks for being here, David.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dan. Always
Yeah.
a pleasure to spend time with you.
Good, good. And I want to welcome everyone being here with us for our Chairman's Chat. Today, we are very happy to have the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. David Joyce. He's also the ranking Republican on our Appropriations Subcommittee Interior, correct? Isn't that right?
That's correct. And,
Yeah.
it's one of the things that when I took over for Interior, I was honored to join the Western Caucus. And I've learned so much under your leadership, and I really appreciate it because I found not only the luncheons, but also the travel of the group to be very interesting, very informative, and a lot of great people working and staying involved in making sure we protect and preserve this beauty of our country for generations to come.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things about the reason for why we do that, it's one thing to sit here in rooms in Washington, D.C. and talk about things. It's kind of theoretical at that point. We need to go out and see firsthand so that we know what we're talking about. And I think it really has been helpful. So thanks for being part of that and participating in those.
And I'm sorry I missed you when you came to the wild state of Ohio on our energy tour.
That was a great tour there.
Yeah, they do a lot in Bill's district. Unfortunately, that ground to a halt under this administration.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But when you declare war on fossil fuels, that this administration doesn't seem to understand that it drives away the necessary investment, because obviously it's an investment intensive to start those wells and to get them going. But now that we've got all the infrastructure in place, we need to continue to punch those wells, maintain the infrastructure, and maintain our energy security.
Right, right. And we're paying the price for those decisions.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So you may or may not have known this, and you listening too, this is Species Week. And now it's easy for you to say. We're talking about species recovery and the Endangered Species Act. This is actually our second annual Endangered Species Week. And so we focus on those things to how can we modernize the Endangered Species Act, which is now almost 50 years old. And and put in place with some very noble intentions, absolutely. No one questions that we want to be good stewards of the flora and the fauna, right? But unfortunately, over the last 5 decades, the ESA it hasn't always been utilized what a lot of us feel in the best way possible. It's in some cases, and I would say in many cases, it's actually been weaponized, used as a weapon to stop things. They're using it as an excuse to stop development, to stop making progress in our country. And that's unfortunate, because the goal of the ESA is to actually help species recover instead of just being used as a ploy for different purposes. So that's something that we're trying to talk through, make sure that we're on the right track on this, and see what we can do to help fix that. And so what I'd like to do in our visit with you, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the dynamic that you have back home, maybe a little bit about your role as ranking member on the Interior Subcommittee for the Committee of Appropriations, a very important position, and maybe a little bit about some of the conservation efforts that you're familiar with and maybe you've been engaged with back home.
Well, thank you, Dan. I can tell you that myself, as a outdoorsman and a hunter, that I truly appreciate all that things like the National Sports Shooting Foundation and the things that they're doing as far as while they're training another generation on how to properly handle firearms and use firearms to become hunters as well. I think that's important. And I know as a kid, when you grew up hunting, there actually was pheasant at home.
Oh, same in our area. We used to have pheasant.
Right. And when you first went out hunting with my dad, your first 2 years you got a stick. And with that stick, you went in. You were the one who went in the brush and tried to drive the birds out for he and my uncle, my older brother, to be able to harvest. And then you eventually groomed into a pellet gun, and then made the next step to a shotgun. but it was learning that whole experience over 4 or 5 years, just being outdoors with your father, learning that hunting, then taking the food home and actually consuming it. It's just one of those experiences you can't forget and you can't pass on to folks unless they experience it almost in the same way. It's one thing to have your friends over for every now and then. I actually get a duck. My wife is convinced that I just go out and
Buy one somewhere, huh?
or to get away in the first thing in the morning. But no, when you do that and you bring it back, it's funny because my kids enjoy it, but my son and I have carried on the traditions my father and I had started. And I believe that the outdoors, the opportunity to explain to them the conservation that takes place of having, like in our backyard, we had 26 acres, so we had big wetlands. And the fact that wetlands are nature's kidneys. And that's what the water percolating through there gets down in the ground, and the well we live off and shower off and drink off is through the water that's being saturated through the ground here. And those little scientific lessons aren't lost on folks. And so I think the conservation efforts I've gotten to be very involved with at home, obviously with the Great Lakes being right there, and I have 3 other members on the committee who are all from the West, and I know I get accused of being a one-trick pony for the Great Lakes. But I've made a point of joining the Western Caucus and going out west to see, or try to see, the elusive sage grouse that Mark Amity and Chairman Simpson and Chris Stewart all rave about. The only one I saw was in the airport. It was a
Stuffed one.
Stuffed one. But someday I'll actually see one in person. But at home we were having this problem with under then Governor Voinovich. We he was a big fisherman, so we got the Great Lakes up and running. When I was a kid in the 70s, it was a toxic mess.
I've heard of that.
We slowly, but we had the river that burned.
Yeah.
And we slowly but surely have brought it back around. And thanks to his investments then with the, through the Sport and the Fish and Wildlife States Commission, it brought back the perch, brought back the walleye, just top-notch fishing throughout. Yeah, people come from all over the country to fish there for the walleye.
Wow.
And then also steelhead. We run the steelhead in the spring and the fall, which has become a big deal too in northeastern Ohio.
I didn't know you had steelhead in Ohio.
Yeah. So and it's all that started in the 90s when Governor Voinovich was there, and now you can feel it, the effects of it, from the tourist industry, the fishing industry, and you realize that these things take time. They thought they were gone, but they all came back once we cleaned up the water and started to make it work. We worry about invasive species, such as the Asian carp.
Yeah,
we had the zebra mussels that came in through the ships, and now all of a sudden we have the Asian carp, and of course that's a huge problem because these things jump out of the water as boaters are going by and have knocked boaters out. Surprisingly, they're huge. But good old American ingenuity as we were trying to, and I even got at that time EPA Administrator McCarthy to admit that it would be okay to fish them to extinction because they're such a problem. And we've provided a system to keep them from getting in the Great Lakes, and so far we've been pretty lucky with doing that. But if they got in, it would be game, set, match for the fishing industry because they would eat everything that would kill off our walleye and our perch.
Are we making headway with those things?
Yes, we have been. And it's down in the Mississippi and along the parts of the river there that they again, Yankee ingenuity, they've been fishing them, they've been shooting them with bow and arrow, they've been making it into meal and sending it back to China where the fish came from. And I understand that they're actually tasty. I've never tried one myself, but I have tried walleye and perch. But there's no planet B. We don't have a chance to do some of these things over, but we can remediate some of the things that have happened to it and try to continue to protect and preserve what we have on the east of the Mississippi, while you all are doing your best in the west of the Mississippi to make sure you maintain that for generations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Interesting stuff. We could go on and talk about some of those things, which is good. So, as you know, we just finished the markups for the appropriation bills. We had some, I'd say, a few wins, even though we're not the majority. We got a few things on the win column, but we were probably more losses, more efforts that we were trying to get done. We still were challenged, like some of the energy issues, some of the WOTUS issue is still a huge challenge for us, and some things like that. One of the things that was concerning to me, and I'm interested to hear your take on this, but there's been an effort for a while to list under the ESA the sage grouse, the greater sage grouse. And we don't want to do that, and we've been stymied on that effort so far. So could you talk about why, from your position, why you think that's significant that we continue to, that we don't put on the national ESA list the greater sage grouse, and what are some of the implications if that happens?
Well, I had deferred to my friends in the West on the committee and members like yourself who obviously understand this issue more clearly because, again, I get to see sage grouse.
Yeah.
But I understand exactly what you're saying with the weaponization of the ESA and doing some of these things. And they might use this to stop progress, or what we view as progress.
On the sage grouse issue, you know, you're right. Amadei, Simpson, I've been engaged with that. Stewart has been. You've been provided great leadership from the Interior Subcommittee. The concern of listing that on the Endangered Species Act list. There's a lot of good things happening at the state level, at the local level. A lot of the tribes, local governments, farmers themselves, land managers, they're doing a lot of good things right now. The concern is if we list it, all that's going to stop. It's going to go away. And we feel that, and kind of like what you were talking about, the people that on the ground know best how to manage these things, and they're doing a really good job if we allow them to do that. We can provide some resources and some guidance and things like that. But if we take away their ability to make those decisions on the local level and think we can do it better from Washington, D.C., that's a huge concern. So
It is for me too, because I truly agree. The people who are there in touch with it day in, day out, and their observations, and they're working with the land and the animals year in, year out, have a much better understanding than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.
yeah.
And I think the best thing we could do is eliminate the bureaucrats and send the money back to those state agencies with some limitations on it. We want, of course, want to see things being done. But then as members, we have a duty to make sure that the money's being spent properly on things that are going to continue to conserve and protect our environment moving forward.
Right. And I think we can point to some really good success stories utilizing that kind of a system versus the whole top-down approach from the federal government. So you're in a position of influence now, potentially in next term even more so. So it's good to hear that you understand how we, using the appropriation process, can positively affect the outcomes of some of these things. So I appreciate that kind of leadership. Anything else you'd like to add before we close up here and let our listeners go?
Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I always appreciate talking to you because you're a learned man of the West and can explain to me some of the things that I don't know, and I don't know everything out there. But I count on going out to visit all of you and visiting our friends in the tribes who have done a great job over the centuries of maintaining as best they can their tribal areas and our states. And I always learn, and that's the beauty of it, is every day when I go out, I learn something new from all of you. And if you have any ideas, thoughts, ways we can be better or better stewards of our country, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up. The tribes have been a tremendous partner in a lot of things, and some of their forest management practices. We can learn a lot from them, and other things too. So, yeah, I love that notion. But David, Joyce from the great state of Ohio, thanks for being in part of my chairman's chat for the Western Caucus.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. All right.